What's up, guys? I'm CandidCrandell, and today I'm going to be talking about Pretty Little Liars Season 5, Episode 7, The Silence of E. Lamb. You know the drill. If you haven't seen the episode yet and you don't want me to spoil anything for you, pause this video right now and come back later after you have seen it. Pam Fields invites Allison and all of the other girls over for dinner, very spur of the moment, which is very un-Pam Fields. Pam tells Emily that she wants Allie to know that if she ever needs an ear that's attached to an adult, she's there for her. That's a good point, Pam. I definitely think Allie could use an ear that's attached to an adult. Whether or not she wants it to be yours remains to be seen. Probably not. Allie seems very suspicious of Mrs. Fields' dinner invite. Hannah asks if they're just supposed to be suspicious of everyone now, and Allie says that it would save time. Hannah says to Allie, "Your wish is our command." I am loving Hannah's sass in this episode, and I really don't get why the girls are all giving Hannah dirty looks, because they all feel exactly the same way. They're just not brave enough to outwardly say it. Allie asks Emily if she'll walk her home after school. She says that she's still pretty shaken up about the whole A attacking her in her house thing. If you're so shook up from that whole situation, Allie, why didn't you call the police? Why didn't you tell your dad? Allie says that she's worried that the teachers will see the bruises on her neck. She's wearing a scarf to cover it up. Emily tells her not to worry, that she's totally overreacting and that the concealer covers most of it. Sydney steps out of a bathroom stall. Clearly she has overheard everything that the girls were talking about because we didn't see her come in during their conversation. She comes out and introduces herself to Allison. She's like, "Hi, I'm Sydney," and Allison totally gives her a look. I think Allison really doesn't trust anyone at this point, but she might be smart not to. If she doesn't know who Sydney is, I think it's probably better of her to be skeptical than to just accept her like the rest of the girls seem to have. Sydney then touches Allie's scarf and is like, "Oh, this is a beautiful scarf." Really, Sydney? Really? It's making me wonder if perhaps Sydney was the person in the black hoodie that attacked Allison the other night. The only thing that I'm like slightly curious about is when Allie was on the phone saying, "Just get there, okay?" I'm wondering if maybe she was talking to someone about getting to her house to stage an attack. That would be pretty bold if that's what Allie was trying to do. Sydney tells Emily about the dead rat that Paige found in her locker. Ugh. The way she's bringing it up makes me think that maybe Sydney had something to do with it. She's like, "Yeah, apparently she has a thing with rodents." Who doesn't have a thing with rodents? And who doesn't have a thing with dead rodents when you're opening your locker and definitely not expecting a dead rodent to fall out? Emily confronts Mona in the hallway and asks her what she knows about the dead rat in Paige's locker. Mona's just like, "Ugh, I heard it's so bad. A dead rat has boy written all over it." We see that Mona is carrying Noel Kahn's notes. I have a problem with this because how does Noel Kahn even have notes when he seemingly is never at school? What are those notes even about? Clearly not anything school related. It's interesting because Noel obviously was helping Allie, but if Noel and Mona are on a friendly basis, I think that that's a little sketchy. Caleb is back at Rosewood High to take his exit exams. He wants to be done with high school. Caleb and Hannah talk about her issues with her friends, and Caleb was like, "You just kind of need to break things off with Allison." Hannah's like, "I can't do that. I've been through a divorce once. I don't want to have to deal with some weird custody argument over our friends." Which is a good point. If Hannah were to say, "Allie, I'm done with you," I think it would definitely cause some issues for the rest of the girls. Not that they don't agree with Hannah, but I think that they would be mad that like Hannah wasn't sticking with them. We're all suffering here. Caleb says to Hannah, "If you lose them, you'll always have me." Oh, Caleb feels. Aria is at her first day of volunteering at Radley and she encounters Eddie Lamb. He asks her if she volunteered before. He feels like they've met. Aria doesn't really seem to know him other than the fact that she saw him on Ezra's surveillance video leaving that picture. What I'm wondering is if either Eddie has met Vivian before and confused Aria for Vivian. It's happened before when Aria was wearing the red coat. Or if perhaps Eddie Lamb saw a picture of Aria and Ezra together at some point, maybe at Ezra's apartment when Ezra was interviewing him. Or does Eddie Lamb remember her from when she came to visit both Spencer and Mona when they were in Radley? I don't think they ever had any direct conversations, but it wouldn't surprise me if Eddie had just noticed that she was there. Allie and Caleb are both taking their exam at the same time. Allie is taking the exam to test into senior year. I was wondering how they were going to deal with that. I love this scene between Allie and Caleb, mostly because Caleb clearly does not believe any of Allie's bullshit. You seem to need a lot of support. I'm not sure what you mean. I'm not sure either. I don't really know you that well. You don't know me at all. No, but I do know you by the destruction that you leave behind. You're like a tornado. I think this rubs Allie a bit the wrong way, and I mostly think that's because she knows that Caleb is dead on and he sees through her entire act. If they haven't met before, Caleb has gotten a read on her incredibly fast. Aria places Bethany's sketch of Mrs. De Laurentiis gardening with the demon to her side among other paintings in an art class at Radley. She's hoping that maybe one of the patients will see it and they'll say something. A patient called Rhonda, also known as Big Rhonda, sees the drawing and calls Aria a thief. She says that Aria stole her drawing. Obviously, this piques Aria's interest because that drawing says Bethany on it. Why does Rhonda know about it? And the nurse reveals to Aria that the police came to talk to Rhonda because Bethany was her former roommate. And the plot thickens. Melissa is back at the House of Hastings, cleaning out the barn. Where has she been? Again? She just keeps disappearing and popping back up whenever it's convenient for her. Melissa says that their dad is staying at her apartment and she came here to give him a little space. And also she's going to try to talk some sense into her mom. I'm not sure what kind of sense you can talk into her. It seems like she's making a pretty sensible decision already. Melissa says that there was food left out in the barn and Spencer's like, oh, that must have been from my sober coach. I'm wondering if it was from someone else though. Perhaps someone that was staying in the barn in secret. Melissa is carrying a trash bag and Spencer wants to see what's in it. Out falls a dead rat in a trap. Ugh. Ooh. This is the second dead rat that we've seen in 2 episodes in a row, so that's gotta be connected. Perhaps Melissa was the one to put the rat in Paige's locker, or she at the very least provided a dead rat. Hannah confronts Caleb because Allie left her a message basically saying that she was pissed after having a conversation with Caleb. What do you care if Allie's pissed? Aren't you like not wanting to be friends with her anyways? Good point, Caleb. But Hannah still seems pretty stressed out about that. Caleb brings beer with him and says that he's celebrating because he decided to walk out of his exit exam and not take it. Caleb is not making very smart choices towards his future right now, but I kind of understand after what he went through. Spencer goes to help Ezra move all of his book research and his spy equipment to another location. Wow, I forgot how enthusiastic you were about watching things. At least Spencer said it. I think it was on everyone's minds. Like, we see the extent of what Ezra has in his apartment and it's a lot. Ezra seems concerned about Aria's safety and he's like, I could have talked to Eddie once the police finished up, and Spencer points out that Eddie Lamb is a lot less likely to tell you things after the police are done. Good point, but for whatever reason Eddie does seem to trust Ezra. I'm curious as to if Ezra is really concerned about Aria's safety while she's at Radley, or if he's worried about something she might find there. It's hard to tell with Ezra at this point, and since he's been sketchy once, I think we all have to be open to the idea that he could still be up to some sketchy stuff. We can still like him and Aria together, but we have to be real about the fact that he's a little weird sometimes. Spencer says, I hope your friend's shed has a lot of room. This is a lot more than Aria let on. What shed are we talking about and what friend owns it? Because last time I checked, Aria had offered to let Ezra put all of his stuff in her attic. So why is it not going to the attic anymore? I wonder if Ezra found another place to keep it because he doesn't want anything to be stored in Aria's house because he might not trust Byron. He probably has some information on him that he hasn't shared with Aria yet. Spencer asks Ezra if she can borrow one of his surveillance cameras. She says that there's somebody that she wants to keep an eye on. And I'm not sure if he agrees to let her use the camera because he's like, well, I mean, she knows that I have this stuff, so I might as well let her use use some of it in hopes that she doesn't tell on me, or if he's doing it because he genuinely wants to help her, or if he has some kind of remote access to that camera even when Spencer's using it. Ezra has a lot of equipment, as Spencer pointed out, and I highly doubt that he bought all of that just to do surveillance for a book, especially when the time that he started doing the surveillance for his book was after he had disowned his family and disowned his inheritance. So it's not like he had loads of money sitting around. I'm wondering if Ezra has had all this equipment for way longer, and if he has, he probably has some kind of connection to the NAT club. I know, I don't necessarily want that to be true, but it's a small town, surveillance equipment. You gotta wonder where they were getting it all from. I know that Jason had some of it in his shed, but he definitely didn't have the full extent of what they'd been using. Sure, Jason had money, maybe he bought some of them off of Ezra, or perhaps Ezra was working with the NAT club, or the NAT club was working for Ezra. I shudder to think at that because that just makes things really creepy, and I might have a hard time shipping Ezra if I found out that he was like that involved with the NAT club, but it's possible. Mona is standing outside the ruins of Toby's house. Emily comes up to confront her and says she's out of her neighborhood, and sometimes I just like to walk. Sure you do, Mona. Sure you do. Emily basically says to Mona, look, if you or any of your friends were behind what happened to Paige, you better stop. Mona seems insulted. You can call me a lot of names, but don't call me an amateur. A dead rat? Really? Mona does have a point. She is certainly not an amateur. If anything, she's bordering on psycho genius, which is even scarier. Spencer thanks Ezra for showing up on that roof, and Ezra says it's turning out to be my greatest hit. But you know, we're 7 episodes into the season. We can have some gunshot wound humor, can't we? Ezra says to Spencer that all of the information that's in the shed, all of those pages, and it's not even the book that he really wanted to write. He wanted to write a book about his family, about him and his brother and what happened after his parents divorced, when they went from being the people that he and his brother thought they were to the people that they actually were. He was trying to get it all down on paper and figure it out. And then Ezra says, so I went with a mystery I thought I could solve, Allie's disappearance. Not only did I not solve it, I think I might have actually made it worse. That's a genuine moment, although I'm curious as to why he's telling all this to Spencer. I feel like this is a conversation that maybe he would have had with Arya at some point, but he hasn't said that to her, so that's making me wonder if he really did want to write a book about his family, or if he's just using this as an opportunity to bond with Spencer and gain her trust a little bit more, since her parents are about to go through a messy divorce. Ezra says maybe we should put down the puzzles and walk away. Hell no, Ezra. We need answers, and it is crazy to me that all of a sudden you're trying to be like, maybe we don't need answers. Rhonda sneaks up on Arya in the art room and tries to grab the back of her head. Ooh, and it's scary. Rhonda confronts Arya about the sketch that she had. Bethany gave those drawings to her, and that Arya must have stolen it out of her book. Arya asks Rhonda why Bethany gave her the pictures, and just then Eddie Lamb walks in, because he's just great at doing that. He's asking what Rhonda thinks Arya stole. Nothing, I have to go take my shower. She could have very easily said that she thought that Arya stole her picture to Eddie, but for whatever reason she didn't. I'm wondering if this is because Rhonda doesn't trust Eddie, or if she knows that he was the one who stole it from her sketchbook. I mean, let's be real. Eddie was the one who ripped it out. He had to be. Arya texts Emily that she's going to be late to dinner because Radley just got interesting. Just got interesting, Arya? I would argue that Radley's been interesting for a while now. Emily comes over to Hannah's house and confronts her about trying to bail on the dinner tonight, that she doesn't want the dinner to just be her, Allie, and her mom. Understandable, because I think that would be awkward, but at the same time, you can't force your friends to go. Hannah says, look, I've hit my Allie limit for one day. Amen, girl. I totally know what you mean by that. Hannah asks Emily what's going on between her and Allison. Emily says nothing, that Allie's just been really needy. As Emily is leaving Hannah's house, she says that Hannah should brush her hair before she comes to dinner. Bitch, you do not get to tell me that I have to come to your dinner and then also tell me to brush my hair. rude. Aria goes to search Rhonda's room for Bethany's sketchbook while Rhonda is in the shower. She looks around in all the obvious places, which I think is a terrible idea because it's Radley and you know that a patient, if there's something important, they're probably going to be hiding it somewhere. Rhonda starts to come back to the room, so Aria hides underneath her bed. While Aria is underneath there, Rhonda comes back and lays on the bed. I was like, oh, this is it. This is how Aria Montgomery dies. Luckily, it seems like Aria has hid in the right place because she looks up and notices that Bethany Young's sketchbook is tucked under the mattress. I don't know how Aria manages to get it out from under the mattress without Rhonda feeling anything. Hannah comes over to Emily's house where Emily's mom, Emily, and Allie are out on the porch next to the drink cart. My big question is, why does Pam Fields have a drink cart with alcohol on it out for a dinner party for teenagers? I understand there's soda on it, it's probably like her beverage cart, but like, put away the vodka if you don't want them drinking it. Allie tells Hannah that she doesn't want her seeing Caleb. Excuse me? That's not your call. Allie says that she doesn't trust Caleb, that she thinks he's a mistake. This really pisses Hannah off, and rightfully so, because Allie has no authority to tell her who she can be with and who she can't. Allie says you have to keep a clear head, Hannah. It's hard to do that when you're kissing somebody. Hypocritical much? Who's the one making out with Emily? Allison. You're not keeping a clear head. Eddie Lamb follows Aria to her car. She's got Bethany Young's sketchbook in her purse and it's slightly peeking out, and she tries to hide it so that Eddie can't see that she has it, since he probably already recognizes the book from taking a sketch from it once. And he asks Aria what she's looking for. She doesn't answer because I think she's a little sketched out by him. After Aria leaves, Eddie pulls out his phone and calls Ezra and says, "Hello, is this Ezra Fitz?" The fact that he says, "Is this Ezra Fitz," would suggest to me that he doesn't call Ezra very frequently. If he was super familiar with Ezra, he would have been able to recognize his voice. That goes back to my question though of how did Eddie Lamb know where Ezra lived if he doesn't even recognize Ezra's voice on the phone? Hannah has poured herself a glass of vodka and is enjoying it throughout dinner. No, Hannah knows what Hannah means. Drunk Hannah should not be my favorite, but she really is. Allie says that she blames herself for what happened to her. That there would be times when she was sitting there in the dark and she would just wonder, what did I do to anyone that was so bad to deserve this? If you're asking, I could give you a list. Clearly this is a story that she is telling for Pam Fields' benefit and she's trying to milk the sympathy card, but I don't think Pam is eating any of the bullshit that Allie is serving. Allie says that she was ashamed of what happened to her and that when she came back, she asked the girls not to say anything because she was so ashamed. And I don't think Pam believes that at all, but she's like, you have some very special friends, Allison. I know. And then drunk Hannah chimes in, you're the special one, Allie. There is no one in the world like you. Ugh. And everyone looks at her like she said something terrible. Why are we getting mad at Hannah when what she's saying is kind of true? You're all thinking it and Hannah's the only one saying it. You know that Pam Fields invited Allison over for dinner so that she could get a read on her. Emily takes Hannah's glass and smells the vodka in it and decides to throw her out of the party. Can I just say that Emily is being a major bitch now that Allie is back? Allie is really bringing out the worst in Emily. I mean, her and Hannah used to be really close. They lived together when Emily's family went to Texas. I don't like this. Teen Sparia is flipping through Bethany's sketchbook and all the beginning sketches are like fairly basic things. Horses and still life drawings and things that you would draw in art class. They noticed that the sketch that was ripped out and given to Ezra was the final sketch that Bethany had done in that sketchbook. So it was the last thing that she drew before she left Radley. The only thing we don't know is where it was on the timeline and how close it was to when she left Radley. It could have been weeks, it could have been hours, it could have been days. And then they get to all the creepy stuff. In the first one, there is a teenage blonde girl who seems to be sitting in a circle of chairs with 3 adults, 2 men and a woman wearing glasses. Kind of like a processing meeting or some kind of like therapy session or something. In another painting, we see a blonde girl looking at herself in the mirror and there is another face off to the side. We don't see anyone standing behind her, but we definitely see a face in the mirror. Then there's a super creepy picture of a blonde girl who seems to have like a burned and scarred and melted face, like she'd been in a fire or something. Reminds me a little bit of the burned alley mask that the Black Widow was wearing. There's also a picture of a like skeletal bird creature with like blade swords for hands, like stabbing something in the back of the head, which is really terrifying and like creepily anatomically correct. There was also a drawing of the demon from Mrs. D's garden carrying someone in pants and a shirt on what looks to be the roof of Radley. Behind the demon, there's a woman in a dress running after them. Then there's a picture of a woman in a dress seeming to fall from the roof. There are bars on the windows of the building that she's falling past, which would suggest that the building she's falling off of is Radley. So I think it's safe to assume that this woman that is falling in the dress is supposed to be Marion Cavanaugh. Like I said last week, I don't necessarily think that Marion Cavanaugh was a target. I think she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time and saw something that she shouldn't have, and someone pushed her off. And then I also think that that means that they blamed it on Bethany, and that Bethany could have been the fragile patient that was on the roof with Marion Cavanaugh. The final two pictures are of Mrs. De Laurentiis, one of her with demon horns, and the other she's missing eyes, and the word liar is plastered all over her face and around her. I'm curious as to what Bethany felt made Mrs. De Laurentiis a liar. The fact that she's missing her eyes, she is being blind to something or blinded by something. Spencer says to Arya that she wants to take pictures of these drawings and show them to Toby. Why would you want to show that to Toby? His freaking house just exploded. Let the man grieve a little bit for the loss of his childhood home. Don't go throwing pictures of his mom falling off a roof at him. Like, come on, Spencer. Hannah runs into Sydney at the brew, and Sydney introduces herself. Why does Sydney feel the need to start just like randomly introducing herself to everyone's friends? Yeah, I get it, she's new in town, but like, she just strikes up conversations with everybody. What a social butterfly she is. Sydney clearly notices that Hannah is drunk and tells her that maybe she should stay with her for a little while and sober up and they can split a panini. And I think this is a terrible idea, Hannah, because we can't trust Sydney and you shouldn't be hanging out alone with her, especially not when you're intoxicated. I think it's pretty clear that Sydney is trying to get some information out of Hannah. Melissa says to Spencer that she's not on anyone's side when it comes to this thing between their parents, and Spencer says, "Oh really? Who's staying at your apartment?" It's a good point, but Melissa is also at home trying to talk to her mom, so I think she's trying to balance it, or at least give the appearance of balancing it. Melissa says parents are not supposed to stop loving each other. Spencer says to Melissa, this is not about love. If this was about love, there wouldn't be bodies buried in backyards up and down the street. This is about lies. This is about whispered conversations that end when someone walks into the room. This is about what really happened to Allison and that poor girl that ended up in the ground. Melissa seems to tear up a little. You're right, but it's still about love, Spencer. Sometimes people do things they can't explain, things that they regret, but it's still about love. Whatever Melissa's big secret is, she did it out of love. According to her, who could Melissa possibly have loved enough to do something illegal for? We know that she loved Ian, Ren, her parents, and she also loves Spencer. On the table where Hannah and Sydney are sitting, there is a paper that has the front page about the explosion at Toby's house. I was just reading about that. It's so scary. Apparently they lost everything. Did you know the people who lived there? I'm sorry, Sydney, you clearly know Jenna. You're freaking sunglasses twins with her, for crying out loud. So clearly Sydney is lying about not knowing who lives in that house. Hannah says, oh yeah, our friend Toby used to live in there with his stepsister Jenna. When she says Jenna, Sydney's immediately like, her name keeps coming up. A lot of people seem to have beef with her. And then Hannah says, actually, I always kind of felt like I was involved in somebody else's battle when it came to Jenna. Kind of like she'd been enlisted by Allison to fight against her, when Hannah doesn't really personally have anything against Jenna. Sydney asks if Hannah's ever thought about making up with Jenna and not fighting anymore. Hannah says that she and the girls had thought about potentially being friends with, she slips and says Shauna, which definitely, I'm sure, piques Sydney's interest. And Hannah says after everything that went down in New York, it was just too late. Sydney's like, oh, that sounds really juicy. Emily's mom asks her if Emily liked Allison as more than a friend before she disappeared. She's like, hindsight is 20/20, and I realized that maybe you thought of Allison as more than a friend. And it's a really sweet moment, especially coming from the place where Pam was crying in the pantry when Maya came over for dinner, and now she's having like a heartfelt conversation with her daughter. Emily admits that she did see Allison as more than a friend. Her mom's like, well, a lot's changed in 2 years. How do you feel now? And Emily says that she's not sure. She's still trying to work it out. Pam says to Emily that she can't tell her how her heart's supposed to work or who she's supposed to love, but that she does still talk to people that are involved in the police precinct, and that the police do not believe Allie's story about her being kidnapped, that there's a lot of problems with it. She doesn't elaborate any further than that. You saved Allison once. You don't have to keep saving her. And I think that that's really great advice that Pam is giving Emily, and I know that it's gotta be hard for her to be sitting there and watching her daughter go through this, because Pam sees through Allie's facade, and I think she always has. But this is something that Emily's going to have to learn for herself, and I don't think that Emily is ever going to be able to be done with Allison until she gets seriously hurt by her. It's gonna take something big for Emily to give up hope in Allie. Sydney offers Hannah a ride home, and Hannah almost takes it, but then Caleb shows up at the brew and Hannah's like, oh, I think I'll walk. Thank goodness Caleb shows up, because I do not want Hannah getting in a car with Sydney. Hannah says to Caleb that she wants to talk about them. There is no me and Travis when you're here. Aww. We get a Caleb kiss in this episode. Finally. Hannah might need an ally in the upcoming future, because it definitely seems like she and Allie are button heads. Spencer catches Allie on the surveillance cam footage. She's in her backyard near the barn, and she's wearing a knit beanie and a hoodie. And it's not the outfit that she was wearing earlier. Spencer's like, what is she doing and where is she going? So she calls over the girls, obviously, to come and look at this. Emily calls Paige and leaves her a message about what happened with the rat and apologizes for getting her involved in this. She's like, I know that it was probably about what you told me, and I'm so sorry. Emily accidentally slips and says, I love you, in her message to Paige, and then corrects it to, I'd love to hear from you. I think that Emily is confused right now. Paige, Allison, she has legitimate feelings for both of them. Aria is about to leave her house, and Ezra is standing right outside the front door like the creeper that he is. Ugh, I love you, Ezra, but you're just being creepy. He's come to ask Aria if she saw Eddie when she was leaving. Eddie called me and set up a meeting. I waited for an hour and then he never showed up. When someone never shows up in Rosewood, it's usually not a good sign. Emily, Aria, and Spencer all get an A text right before Hannah walks into Spencer's kitchen. Hannah didn't get one. The text says, New York, New York, it's a hell of a town. Allie's keeping secrets. Maybe it's because of Hannah's big mouth. So Hannah didn't get that text, and it got sent like right before she walked in the door. That makes Hannah look totally sketchy to the other girls. Now, the obvious thing to think would be that Sydney sent that text, right? Because Hannah just talked to Sydney about New York. I'm wondering if maybe it was Allie sending that text message trying to break Hannah away from the group. I think that Allie sees Hannah as a threat right now, especially because of who she's become. Hannah's gotten a lot smarter. Hannah's gotten a lot bolder. At the end of the episode, we get another scene of A in their lair. They have a knife, which happens to be the same knife that we saw them using to cut the chicken to feed to Tippy the parrot. And they are opening up a letter addressed to Mrs. Fields. Inside the envelope, we see that it is an engagement party announcement for Ella and Zach. No, A, leave Ella alone. You already put bees in her car. Just let her be happy. We also see the ceramic clown bank that has been in several of the A's lair cutscenes, in Mona's lair in the Lost Woods Resort. We also saw it when A was hiding the money that Ashley Marin stole from Mrs. Potter. So some big questions that I have. Who was the blonde girl that Dr. Palmer was telling Marion Cavanaugh to stay away from? I have a feeling that she might be the blonde girl that we saw in Bethany's drawings. Some people think that the girl in the drawings could be Bethany herself, or those drawings could be of Cece Drake when she came into Radley pretending to be Allison. It's starting to make a lot more sense why Jessica De Laurentiis was so freaked out when she got that call that her daughter was at Radley saying that she wanted to stay. I guess if your kid was mistakenly at a mental hospital, you'd want to get there as quickly as possible, but Jessica's panic seemed to stem from the fact that maybe there was something there that she didn't want Allie to see. I'm also curious as to why Allie dared Cece to go into Radley pretending to be her in the first place. I think Cece thought it was probably just a dare, but Allie may have had an ulterior motive. Bethany could have overheard Cece pretending to be Allison, and she might have put together the connection between Jessica De Laurentiis and Allison De Laurentiis. Cece looks enough like both Allison and Jessica to have been able to pull that off. I also have a feeling that Allie hasn't been to Radley before, and if she has, she hasn't been using her real name. Because when the people at Radley called Mrs. De Laurentiis to say that her daughter was there, if they had met the real Allison before, they would have known that Cece wasn't her. I mean, yes, they look similar, but you can still tell them apart. So if Allison was going into Radley, which she still totally could have been, she was probably using a different name. She could have been using Cece's name, or she could have been going as Vivian, wearing the dark wig. Why is Sydney lying about knowing Jenna? If she was just friends with Jenna or knew her from another school or something like that, don't you think she would have come clean about that? Instead, she is completely denying even knowing who this girl is when she clearly does. The only reason why I think that Sydney would just want to outright deny knowing Jenna is if there was some kind of familial connection that they didn't want anyone to know about. When they were wearing the sunglasses, they did look pretty similar. Who is the demon in Bethany's drawings? I think it's safe to say that it's not Jessica De Laurentiis, because in the sketch where Mrs. De Laurentiis is gardening, the demon is still in it, and it's not necessarily like connected to Mrs. De Laurentiis. If the drawing is done from Jessica's front yard, which I think it might be, then to the side that the demon is on would be the Hastings house, or it could be Cece, it could be Allie, or it could be Jason. I think once we figure out who that demon is, we'll figure out who was responsible for Marion Kavanaugh's death. Now, even if the police never filed charges against Bethany for murder, I'm sure that if she was believed to have been the one who pushed Marion Kavanaugh off the roof, it probably increased her security. Maybe she wasn't allowed to have visitors. Maybe they were even considering moving her to a more secure location. Any of these things would have been cause for Bethany to get really mad, especially if she wasn't the one who killed Marion. Also, speaking about Bethany, I'm sorry, but I don't understand how they are just now figuring out that Bethany was the one in that grave. How does a 17-year-old patient go missing from a mental institution for 2 years before they even think to test those remains and see if it's her? Why wasn't this publicized? When the girls were doing research and trying to figure out who from around the area could have gone missing around the same time as Allison, Bethany Young's name didn't come up at all. Clearly, her disappearance was kept out of the media, away from the public. I don't even know if the police were notified. If they were probably keeping it from the public because they thought that it was involved with Allison De Laurentiis somehow, and they didn't want to give that out in an attempt to narrow down the suspects. Sometimes the police will do that. They'll keep important information out of the press so that if someone says something about it, it's a dead giveaway that they know too much and that they didn't just read about it. Or it could be another Radley cover-up. If Bethany didn't have parents that visited her very much, then it's highly possible that she could have been missing and the Radley staff could have been giving them updates and being like, oh yep, Bethany's great. I don't know what their reason would have been for covering up her disappearance, but they've covered up things in the past. So this brings me to who Jessica De Laurentiis was on the phone with the night that Allison went missing, or when she was sounding worried and asking for them to please send someone. I'm wondering if that call was from Radley telling Jessica De Laurentiis that Bethany Young had escaped. This would be interesting to me though, because why would they call Jessica De Laurentiis so soon after it happened? Don't you think that the first people that they would call would be the parents? Is this a clue that Jessica got that call because she is Bethany's mother? Or was she called because they knew that Bethany had issues with her and they wanted to warn her that she was out and probably coming for her? It just seems strange that we haven't seen Bethany's parents, we haven't seen any press conferences. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of this week's episode, and if you have any theories or questions, I would love to discuss them with you. If you don't already, you can follow me on Twitter, Tumblr, Blogspot, and Instagram, username CandidCrandell. You can also chat with me live on Beamly every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific during new Pretty Little Liars episodes, link down in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you again on Tuesday. Bye!